Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on our exploration through the Criterion Collection set from 2020, which is called the Complete Films of Agnes Varda. And today, I would like to focus our attention, if I may, on the Blu-ray disc, which is the 8th in such set. It is called Program 8, and it is given the title of No Shelter. This 8th disc is Program 8 in the great set, The Complete Films of Agnes Varda. It is given the title No Shelter, and it has two works by Agnes Varda, both being described as being from 1985. One is a feature-length work, another is a shorter work, approximately 30 minutes. The longer feature-length work is a brilliant film, and it is in French, Sans toit ni loi, which can be translated, I understand, into English, for example, as no roof or no shelter and no rule or no law. So no shelter, no law. And it is often associated, or it is often referred to in English under the title of Vagabond, and it stars Sandrine Bonnaire as Mona in a raw, powerful, bold, electrifying performance, and I'll get to that shortly. The second film that is part of this Disc 8, Program 8, is 7 pièces, cuisine, salle de bain, and it also has the parenthetical à SAISIR. And this is also a very intriguing work, which I will get to later in this video. The title, No Shelter, I think is very apt here, because we have two films that in one form or another deal with this concept of shelter, of a kind of home or family life, or lack thereof. So in one film we actually have a character who actually has no shelter, and we follow her and her wandering and her, some might call it meandering through the countryside, but it is in fact a kind of road movie, but it is one where she is alone, she is fiercely independent, and she is without any kind of home, at least from what we can gather as viewers, as audience members. So that's one film. The other film is in fact perhaps an opposite take on this, which is the concept of one home in particular, the architectural design of the home and the rooms, and how it is occupied by a particular family or particular set of people, and how there are certain events and things played out, both real and surreal, thus presenting an interesting, almost case study of a family in a home that is artistically presented. So this is 7 pièces, cuisine, salle de bain, so the second film. So in both instances, we have some kind of treatment or handling of the concept of home or lack thereof. And so therefore, I think the title here, No Shelter, is very apt. If we now go to the first film, in English referred to as Vagabond, what can we say about this film? In essence, it is a story about a young woman named Mona, again played with great brilliance and ferocity and raw emotional power by Sandrine Bonnaire. From the very outset of the film, we as viewers discover what happens to her at the end of her story. Then the film boldly goes back in time and covers her before what happens to her at the end. So we start with what happens to her at the end, and then it goes back and it covers her life up to this particular event. And so we see her story and her life as someone who is without home. She is homeless, she is wandering, she is on the road, she is by herself, she is a kind of drifter. She is also very much fiercely independent, strong-willed, intelligent, and she has enough reserve and enough intelligence to have a sense of self-awareness. She is also very resistant to many concepts of social constructs. The idea of being in a kind of state of complacency with a boss and work. She seems to reject this. She seems also to reject other modes of domesticity that involve home and work for whatever reason. And while those reasons aren't necessarily presented to us through a straightforward type of situated narrative. In other words, we don't get a narrative that has explicit showings of what happens to the character of Mona and why it was she ended up being who she was when we see her in the film. Rather, we get her and her wandering the landscape. We see her meeting people along the way. And we also get, from these various meetings with people, we get a kind of interview process that the film turns into. The film seems to be interviewing these people or getting their accounts after the fact about this young woman, Mona. And so we get almost a type of news reportage style accompanying the actual story of our viewership of the story of Mona as she goes from place to place to place, and see along the way not just her physical environs, but we also get a sense of her emotional state of mind. We get hints as to what she did before, although, as I indicated to you, the film does not explicitly show us anything of her past beyond what is actually shown in the film. And so we get her lived-in experience, and her life on her terms. And as I say, she is a character that is fiercely strong-willed and independent and free. And in many ways, this film is tracking not just her in her state of freedom, but also the consequences of such freedom and liberation. And perhaps those consequences are painted by Varda in this masterful cinematic way, using certain techniques of camera. There are specific types of dolly shots or tracking shots, and I'll get to those in a second, that are breathtaking and poetic and truly stunning. Combine that with this brilliant sense of capturing the moment through the cinematography, also with the utterly captivating musical score. Make this film, and also together with the top-notch, stellar performances, led, of course, by the core performance, Mona, played by Sandrine Bonnaire, in a fiery, fierce-willed performance that is utterly brilliant. This becomes a masterwork, a true masterwork that is bleak, that doesn't shy away from showing us the quote-unquote aspects of Mona's character that might not necessarily be wholly likable, but the film is presenting her on her terms and who she is, and all that such situation means, all the way to the very end. And it is a testament to her spirit. It is also looking at the world and looking at the harshness of the world, seeing how certain choices of people might have consequences beyond what it is they might immediately think. Also, we see, as I say, a character that sometimes is likable, sometimes is unlikable, but that is a portrait of a human being. And we finally see that portrait carried through to the very end in a world that could be described as being bitter, cold, brutal, bleak, but always filled with a sense of truth and a sense of trying to get at the heart of understanding who we are as people and why it is we do what we do and why it is we act out the way that we do, as exemplified, as I say, by these characters and led with such ferocity and brilliance by this character of Mona. This is, in essence, I think, the film Vagabond, or Sans Toi ni Loi. And as I say, it is one of my absolute favorite films by Agnès Varda. It is so moving and touching and shocking, and remains a brutally honest and sincere example of the cinematic, poetic brilliance of Agnès Varda. That also is consistent with her filmography, because, as I say, we get these various modes of storytelling. We also get this sense of a news reportage, which can be said to be very much akin or similar to a almost documentary style filmmaking. We get characters talking to the camera or slightly talking to the camera, so there's also this playful way that the camera interacts with this world. But all in all, through and through, we always get the caring, earnest, sincere camera eye of Agnès Varda as she looks out onto this world, as she sees how the characters interact and inhabit this world. And even when the events seem at their bleakest, Varda's cinematic eye is always very sharp, very keenly focused, and always very sincere, and always searching for the heart of what it is that is absolutely essential of the human spirit. And I think that is the key, or one of the great keys to the success of this film, Vagabond, or Sans Toi ni Loi. So with that, we have here the presentation of this film, Vagabond. I should point out that the film was also part of a DVD set from the Criterion Collection that we saw a few years back, which is right here. There's this box, and Vagabond is right here. It was also, I should say, some years prior to this, a separate Laserdisc release from the Criterion Collection. So the film Vagabond does have, in terms of Criterion release history, a history in that context, way back from the Laserdisc days. And here we have it on this great Blu-ray presentation. Included with the film Vagabond are certain supplements, and I'd like to go over those very briefly right now. The first is a short work, which is a documentary called Remembrances in English, and it's approximately 40 minutes from 2003. And this is a documentary where Varda is talking about the film, talking about her approach to the film, and also Sandrine Bonnaire is featured as well, so we get to hear some of her thoughts about the approach to her acting in this world and as the character of Mona, some of the choices that she made, some of the truths of certain shots and certain scenes, moments where she was actually showing what it was she was feeling, and certain other iconic images and moments and the stories behind those, as well as other great and insightful anecdotes about the film itself and how one views the film some years after it was initially released. So this is a great and essential documentary look back on the film Vagabond. So this is Remembrances. Next we have a short work which is described as being from 2003, and it is called in English The Story of an Old Lady. And the old lady, that is the title in question, is Marthe Jarnias, and she is the actor who appears in Sopia's Cuisine Salle de Bain, and she also appears in the film Vagabond in a kind of key role. And so we have this short work that it's acknowledged early on that the actual materials were not in the best of condition when Agnès Varda returned to them in 2003. But this is in essence Agnes Varda talking to this particular actor and getting her to reminisce about certain aspects of her life and how it figures in some ways, in some very interesting ways, to the character that this actor plays in the film Vagabond. So this is called Story of an Old Lady. I should be very clear. The Criterion supplement section in the Blu-ray describes it as being, in 2003, Agnes Varda paid a visit to Marthe Janias. And I think that kind of description is also found on the menu of the earlier DVD. So it suggests perhaps that Agnes Varda visited this actor in 2003 and talked to her. Actually, that's not the case. My understanding is that this footage was filmed in 1985 or around 1985. Then the footage was stored away. And then when Agnes Varda looked at the footage again in 2003, it was in a certain physical condition that affected its overall visual presentation. But still, Agnes Varda then took this footage in 2003 and worked with it to create what ended up becoming the Story of an Old Lady. So I don't think that it's actually the case where Agnes Varda visited her in 2003. That doesn't make sense to me. But in essence, she is visiting her in the sense that she is, as I understand it, visiting the footage, such footage having been shot many years previous in the mid-1980s. So that makes sense to me as a description of the work, The Story of an Old Lady. And the stories that she mentions are very charming. There are some moments of laughter that remind me of some interesting scenes in the film Vagabond where she is laughing, and it's a very touching and heartwarming portrait. And Varda does that so well. She is able to create these human portraits through cinema. And this is another example of this, I think. So it's another one that's well worth checking out. Next is a 12-minute, The Story of an Old Lady is approximately 3 minutes. Next is another short, which is a 12-minute short called Music and Dolly Shots. And this is Agnes Varda, from 2003, Agnes Varda and composer Joanna Bruzdovic. And this is really essential because it goes into two components of the film Vagabond that are essential. First is the music. The music by Bruzdovic is haunting, it's captivating, it's eerie, it's scary. It actually gives the sense of this film. I think this film can be described as being in many types of narrative modes, and I'll get to that with a later supplement. It can be described as being like a mystery film or a road movie or a sort of network narrative, and in the words of David Bordwell. It could also be described as being a horror film, a suspense film, a really creepy horror film. And I think the music adds so much to that flavor and effect. It is one of the most chilling scores in any Varda film. So it's great to hear the interaction between Bruzdovic and Varda in this supplement. The second component as to why I think the supplement is really interesting is that it talks about what is called the dolly shot, or what Varda refers to as the grand series of shots. These are, according to Varda, a set number of shots in the film Vagabond that are these dolly shots, or these moving camera shots from right to left, and they start from one specified place and they end in another specified place. And they usually follow the character of Mona, but then they follow some kind of other object. And these are strategically placed throughout the film. They are also strategically timed and structured in terms of a beginning point and an end point. And so we get the philosophy, the philosophical explanation from filmmaker Varda about this grand series or dolly shots, and we get also the technical and structural specifications according to Varda, as to these shots. So, and then we get a presentation of those shots with the music played in one long continuous piece to give us a sense, a further idea as to Varda's explanation of this approach in her cinema. This is unbelievable, because this is one of the great, perfect encapsulations of Varda's cinematic artistry at its very best. I've said over the course of many a video talking about this that, in my view, Varda is a filmmaker that deals in many modes. Perhaps fundamentally speaking, in one way she's dealing with a type of documentary approach to cinema, and in other ways she's dealing with a cinematic poetry. Here I would say we have this sense of cinematic poetry. In other words, the camera commands the space, and it seems like it is almost like a character in and of itself, while still retaining this air or sense of capturing the real and the tragic and the dramatic that is encapsulated by the story of Mona as we see her. So there's this interesting convergence in visual terms through this use of the dolly shot or the tracking shot or the moving camera. This is so mind-blowing to me, and the way that it's presented here is so artistic and so revelatory that I would recommend it to absolutely everyone who is interested in learning more about this film Vagabond. So that's a great work to have. And then we have another supplement, which is a radio audio excerpt. The radio program is from 1986, La Nuit sur un plateau, and this is a conversation, a radio interview between the writer Nathalie Sarraute and Agnès Varda. And this is very important because Nathalie Sarraute is very much a key figure in terms of what were some of the inspirations behind Varda in making this film. There were many sources of inspiration, and you can find out more about that in the earlier supplement Remembrances. You can also read a little bit about that in the booklet that accompanies the set. But another source is the works of Sarraute. And this radio interview, a conversation between the two of them, moderated by an interviewer, is very much helping to illuminate the reasons why. And we also get this great admiration on the part of Varda for the author, and also we get specific instances, according to Varda, as to how Sarraute's works influenced the film Vagabond. There is a mention of for example, the work Martereau, and also the Planetarium. And Varda cites these two works as examples of, for example, how Varda wanted to express in cinematic terms a character that was very enigmatic, that we didn't necessarily get all the details of the backstory. There is a certain elliptical quality that creates the enigmatic nature of the presentation of this main character. Also, there is an element of the story involving an aunt and a nephew and a piece of property. And I think Varda acknowledges that she was inspired by a certain aspect of the Planetarium. And so those are great insights and examples as to how and why Nathalie Sarraute was a source of great inspiration for Varda, in particular vis-a-vis this work. So another essential supplement to listen to. I should say that thus far, these supplements can also be found on the earlier Criterion DVD. But what is new is a supplement from 2019, and this is from the Criterion Channel's Observations on Film Art. This is called Plotting in Vagabond, approximately 15 minutes. This is David Bordwell, the great David Bordwell, giving us his take on the various, what are referred to as narrative strategies of Vagabond. And he presents essentially three narrative strategies, which I think are brilliantly outlined and presented by him. The first is that the film acts as a type of road movie. The second is the film acts as a type of mystery movie. And then the third is that the film acts as a type of network narrative. Road movie means we follow Mona as she is on the road. She's hitchhiking and going from place to place on what seems to be this aimless journey to somewhere, nowhere perhaps, but it is therefore a road movie in that sense. And Bordwell makes some interesting insights about how this might be seen to be very much consistent with the quote-unquote typical road movie of the time, but it's also unique because we have, for example, a female protagonist at the center of the road movie, where it seems, according to Bordwell anyway, that it's very often that we have road movies that are led by male characters. So here we have a female-led road movie construction. The second narrative strategy that he cites is the mystery movie, because he sees the idea of the news reportage and the interview process, and we see the start of the film starting with what happens to Mona at the end of her story. So, and then it builds, it then turns into a structure where the film essentially is trying to put together what happened to the character of Mona leading up to this moment. So it acts, therefore, as a type of mystery. And I agree 100% with this. And it also allows for this, as I say, news reportage ability to, quote-unquote, interview people who encountered Mona along her journey. And we get this almost after-the-fact reportage-style interviews with these people. Sometimes they're talking to the camera, sometimes they're talking off screen, sometimes they are talking to people, other characters within the space. So even this notion of the interview style is itself blurred and also filled with variance, which I think David Bordwell acknowledges very well. And it points to the complexity of Varda's cinema style writ large. But this is a great way, a cohesive way to structure a viewing and interpretation of the film Vagabond. So that's the second narrative strategy. The third narrative strategy that he cites is network narrative. This is, I think, referring to the way that the characters are plotted. He gives an example of, say, a Robert Altman film like Nashville. We have these films that are a tapestry of many different characters, and along the way we see how they are interrelated within the confines of the story. Here in Vagabond, we get different characters that might seem disparate, but along the way we realize that there is a certain connection that is made, and perhaps we identify that connection by a certain signifier or connective symbol of the film, which we see often in network narrative films outside of Vagabond. Maybe we follow an object that somehow connects certain people together, or maybe that then leads to revelations about their familial connections or that sort of thing. Here in Vagabond, I think Bordwell is suggesting that perhaps the connective symbol in cinematic terms is the character of Mona herself. And it's, in fact, through her journey that we see the characters in the so-called periphery and how they might be even more connected than we might have otherwise thought. And so this is, I think, a great way of describing as he puts it, the narrative strategies of the film Vagabond. I think this is a great supplement, essential, so enlightening. David Bordwell's comments are great as always. And I would probably say too that we could also maybe consider other additional possible narrative structures or narrative strategies. I was hinting at before the possibility of looking at this film as a type of horror film or suspense narrative film as maybe a variant of that. But it is a horror film in terms of the bold bleakness of the world and the chilling factor of many of the choices that are made. And it is a very scary film in that sense. It is also very suspenseful in terms of what is going to happen next. We're not quite sure. And I think the elliptical nature, the fact that we are not given all the bits of background information, I think adds to the heightened sense of suspense. And especially to knowing what we know at the very start of the film, we realize that these characters are going to lead towards some kind of conclusion. Again, we know this at the start, but how do they get there? that is also another keen source of cinematic suspense. And so I think there is also that sense. But I think David Bordwell's conversation really hints at these moments as well, especially in his conversation of the mystery type of narrative strategies. So this is a really excellent supplement to have from 2019. And then last but not least, the supplements end with a great trailer for the film Vagabond. So please check that out if you can. But that's not all, of course, because the second work that is included on this Program 8 disc is called Cette pièce, Cuisine Salle de Bain, also with the parenthetical à SAISIR. And this is a very interesting, peculiar work from Agnès Varda. And I think the introduction that Agnès Varda gives on this film from 2007 is very helpful in trying to illuminate the meaning and structural purpose behind the film and how, therefore, one can view the film. I think it is, at the very essence, a film which is, of course, taken from, according to Varda, a sort of advertisement, a real estate advertisement describing a particular piece of real property, realty estate. Cette pièce, cuisine, salle de bain, I think refers to 7 rooms, a kitchen and bathroom. And so this is, I think, very interesting. First of all, we understand that there are connections, connective tissues, if you will, with the film Vagabond. For example, there is in Vagabond a character of an elderly woman in a particular place, and the number of rooms, I think, is referred to, and so that's very significant. That actor also appears in this film, Cette pièce, Cuisine, Salle de Bain, in a very interesting and quite bold role. And she's not the only actor that appears in both works. There's also Yolande Moreau, who appears in both works in a very similar type of role as a kind of cook or housekeeper. She has a similar role in Vagabond, of course. So in those instances, we have similarities between the two films, Vagabond and Cette pièce, Cuisine, Salle de Bain. But the shorter film can also act as its own entity, of course, because it's in one way a very surrealist, abstract portrait of a particular family or occupants of this place that has various rooms and various objects in the rooms, and things pop up in the rooms that give it a certain sense of character. They might seem a little bit out of place or strange or odd or surreal, which I think adds to the sense of the beautiful abstraction that Varda gives in the presentation of this. And I think also what's really interesting too, and this leads into a nice discussion of the supplement, which is as I say, the introduction by Varda herself. In that introduction, she talks about the fact that the film almost serves as a type of improvisational exercise. In other words, it's like maybe a jazz musician's improvisational jam session. So she acknowledges that she is looking at the act of creativity as a form of improvisation. And here we see her take certain elements here, there, and put them in this very quite playful mix that is also dealing with the sense of a place and architecture and structure as connected with this particular family and an elderly woman. And also there is a baby and child, and then it turns into a very surreal type of work that creates this sense of the unexplainable as it's expressing this otherwise very tangible thing, which is a house or a property. So I think there is a sense of the imagination running wild in an improvisational way, and I think therefore as a cinematic example, I think it's really a great one to have. Also with its connections with Vagabond, as I mentioned earlier. Also, it can be said to be consistent with the body of work by Agnes Varda that we have seen thus far in certain ways. For example, we have seen, of course, that Varda is always concerned with people and place, and how the way that people inhabit a place informs such place, and sometimes vice versa. We have seen this, of course, in films like Daguerreotype or Lines, Love, and Lies, for example. Here is the same thing. The place that these people inhabit has almost a character in and of its all its own, and also the place is inhabited by people that have characteristics all their own. And as time progresses, so do these characters, and we see this or feel this sense of time as it dawns upon each of these characters and how they react. Also, there is a sense of family dynamics, and also maybe a hinted at story of a young woman, in particular, a young girl growing up in this household, and her want to be free or have a sense of freedom. And of course, we've seen this sense of wanting to be free or breaking free, and expressing that through various forms or experiences of youth and adolescence growing up. We have seen this played out in the film Vagabond. We have also hinted at in Vagabond, at least. We have also seen this played out in a film One Sings, the Other Doesn't. And so I think this is therefore another signifier, a way to see that this film, Cette pièce cuisine salle de bain, is very much inherent to the cinema filmography that is the films of Agnes Varda. So another, I think, key work, and it's great to have it here. And with that also, I recommend strongly the introduction from Agnes Varda in 2007. It's a very interestingly shot introduction too. There's some really playful ways of use of filters and that sort of thing. So take a look at it if you can. So that is the Program 8 disc in this set, No Shelter. And as I say, Cette pièce cuisine salle de bain is a very fascinating work, and it's worth checking out. Also, the film Vagabond is Saint-Ouen Nillois is, for my money, one of the greatest films, and it's one of my absolute favorite films from Agnes Varda, and it has not, for me, lost any of its power and place. It is still very raw, unnerving, and powerful, and so great. It is so great. A great testament and example of the cinematic achievement and great highs of the world of Agnes Varda. It's wonderful to have it here, and so please check it out if you can. No Shelter. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I really appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.